So if we go on the next slide, please, Sarah. So this is kind of like my approach, and this is how I would go about setting out a question. And I know there's like 8 steps here. The ones in the middle are obviously the really important ones, but first of all, do not freak out when you see a question. I see so many students, and I know so many of my friends in the GAMSAT who were freaking out when they saw the questions they hadn't seen before, or seeing some random thing that they're just like, I don't even know where to begin. And I think that's totally the wrong way to go about it. Because as terrifying as that may look, you will know a lot more than you think you do. You always kind of just feel unsure about yourself, but you will know a lot more than you think you do. And a lot of the time, it's not necessary to understand all the complexities and the intricacies of the question to be able to work out the answer to the question. A lot of the information, if any of you have done some practice questions for section 3, they give you a lot of information that isn't relevant and isn't necessary to answer the question. So do not stress about it. As long as you get the basic principles, it's all you need to know. So second step, take a breath. Make sure you still aren't freaking out, because often that'll put you in the wrong mindset. And if you're freaking out already, thinking, oh, I don't know how to do this, I'm not aware of this, you're not going to be in the right mindset, and you're not going to have the right motivation to work through the question in a really logical manner, which is all that they're really asking you to do. So now going through like the actual context. So this is just my strategy of approaching a difficult question. Obviously, there are people have lots of different ways of doing this. This is one I found it's a really good way of kind of breaking up into a bit of a systematic way, but also making sure you get all the important points, but try and do it in as time efficient manner as possible. Because obviously there is a bit of a rush for some of the questions, but you want to make sure you get all the important and relevant. So I always have a skim through the text. I like to do that first. Some people will read questions first. That's also okay. But for me, I like to skim through the text first and identify all the important or useful points. Obviously, there'll be a lot of irrelevant information in there. So have a quick read through. And if there's something important, I would definitely be making a note of it. Obviously, you guys can't highlight or underline anything with it being online, but that's why your scrap bit of paper will be really useful. And just go, okay, this is a really important point. They've made this really clear here, or this is something I didn't know about, and that could be a useful point. So once you've gone through your text, I always then go and have a look to consider if any diagrams or graphs which they may include. And particularly when you're dealing with an abstract problem or something that is a model or demonstration of something else, and there's different parts of the graph, that's where it can get a bit confusing. And so my advice kind of when you're looking at those kind of things is to look at components individually. Okay, so what actually is this? And then also look at them to the other components and see the relationships and how they interact with each other, rather than just being bombarded with this information all at once. Look at them individually and break it down before you then look at it as like a whole big picture. So then looking at your diagrams, looking at your text, particularly if you're we're going to be focusing on a chemistry question today, so this is really like kind of really prominent there, but identify any patterns or trends that you identify. Often they will give you something, and a lot of the time they're not giving you trick questions. They're not going to give you something that's really out of whack, really out of the trend. They will make it quite clear if that is the case. But identify what is actually occurring. The number of times students will go through this really complex diagram, do all the hard work in understanding what it is, and then miss one simple didn't pick out what that trend is. They looked at all the hard work and then just didn't take that 1 second, just go, okay, in simple terms, this is what is occurring in the question. And I know this is really difficult to try and explain without example, which is why most of my section, we're actually going to be putting this into practice and going through a question with this kind of approach. And then it comes to kind of actually answering the question. So a lot of that you can do when you're reading. And my kind of goal is don't keep going back to the stem, but have that quick stem through and have these kind of points as you're going through. So then when it comes to answering the question, basically my advice, this is the way I've always done it. Everyone will be different, but eliminating answers is your best friend. I literally go through and I go, that can't be right. That doesn't make sense. Something in the stem contradicted this, and cross them out as I go along. And that often is the best way to come to the correct answer. It's very rare for them to give you something and be like, oh, you just got to know this and be able to come to this answer in your head. They will give you options there. It is a multiple choice exam. Some of them will be more right than others, and that's where it becomes a little bit tricky, but a lot of the time you can get yourself on the right track and work out what the question is actually asking you by simply going through and working out what the answer isn't going to be. That's just as important as working out what the answer is going to be. It makes it a lot quicker as well. And then number 7 is probably my biggest takeaway from today, is going back over and checking, does it make sense? You've gone into the intricacies and the depths of all this science, but just in plain simple terms, does it make sense? Could you go back and go, okay, follow your step logically and get to that end without making some massive leap out of nowhere? A lot of times students will do that. They get so caught up in something that they realize they've done something that actually makes no sense. So always go back and double check that. And then my last advice is take a 5-second mental break to celebrate when you've gone through a really tough, really in-depth question. Obviously it is time, so you can't sit back and turn your brain off completely, but take that little second, that little bit of to refresh yourself before you dive into something on a completely different topic. And so with that, we're going to actually go to our question. So I would recommend, if you guys have got the PDF up, if you get that up, because it is a bit of an interesting STEM and we'll probably come back to it a few times as we're going along. So this is our crazy, scary chemistry question. And most of you probably will have not much idea of what is going on here. So just before we go, I'm just going to give you a minute and a half just to have a quick read through and have a look at the diagram, and then work through identifying the important points out of this STEM. For that now. All right, so don't stress if you haven't completely gone through it. We're going to talk it out loud as a group. So first thing is having a look at the text. First of all, don't freak out. Second thing, let's go through the text. So reading through the text and kind of identifying what are the important points. So it's talking about a type of reaction here, which we're forming new carbon-carbon bonds. So that's one important point. That's actually what is occurring. It's telling you right there. There's no need to work it out. They're telling you what's going on. Giving you an example of types of chemistry, doesn't mean too much. And it's telling us that it's occurring between unsaturated carbons, so something with a double or triple bond, using philic and nucleophilic. And it's even giving you mini definitions there. So no need to have a heap of prior chemistry knowledge right there. And it's also telling you here sp2 cross-coupling is what is occurring. And so that may mean something to you, it may not, but basically all that's meaning, it's referring back to the unsaturated. We're talking about carbons that do not have 4 substituents around them. That's all it refers to. It's also telling us here we're using a palladium catalyst, and that's about all we really need to know. About the ligands and stuff, that's not overly relevant. We're looking at a palladium catalyst. So then we go over and we have a look at our diagram. And this is where it kind of looks a bit terrifying. But we've got a cycle, so I think that's the most important thing to look at. We've got a continuous cycle. So whatever occurs, we're always coming back to this palladium 0 catalyst at the top. So that does not change. So it's already told us it's catalyst, so we know it's not partaking in the reaction. But whatever occurs, we always come back to this point. And we can see that we have 2 reagents going in, reagent A in step 1 and reagent B in step 2. And we're coming out with one product, and we have our little MX as our byproduct here as well. So we can say we've got 2 things going in and we've got 2 things coming out. Let's break it down as simple as it is. And if we look at reagent A and reagent B, it's a little bit difficult to tell in this example because they actually are very similar molecules, but basically they're just combining to form this product. That's all that's occurring, and the M and X are coming out. And it also tells you down here what M and X actually are. So it doesn't take too long. As terrifying as it looks, all that's happening is reagent A and reagent B are binding together. Okay, so we might go on to the next slide and we'll have a go at answering some questions based on this. So yeah, I'd keep that PDF up with you guys if you want to refer back to the cycle. That's a really good idea. Yes.
Just to let everyone know, I'm just going to activate the poll, and then as Keely says it's time to do each question, you can press it. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sarah. Okay, so I'm not going to read the question out to you guys. I'll give you guys probably only 30 seconds for this one to have a look at what you think the answer is, and then we'll talk through how to kind of go about getting to this answer. All right, how are we going with those answers, Sarah? I can't actually see anything on this end.
Oh, I can share them for everyone to see. Wait. Oh, maybe I can't.
That's all right. Can you tell me what the main answer kind of looks like, so I know?
We might wait because 2 people have put it in so far. So if you've got an answer for question 1,
yeah,
put it in the poll.
Cool. Yeah, don't get wrong, guys. Like, again, this is all anonymous, so we can't actually see this. Well, I can't see it at all. It's all Sarah. But we're going to talk through it anyway. So I just want to have like a bit of an idea, give you guys a chance. There's no point me explaining it if you guys have no idea where we're kind of going with it. Have a go of the question, and then we'll be in a much better place than understand kind of my approach and how I would address a question like this.
Yeah. And just letting you know, it is like, it's completely anonymous. Like, I can't see who put what, so don't stress. Okay.
Okay, have we got a few more?
Yes. Okay, we've got the most for question 1 is C.
Okay,
with 60%.
Awesome. Okay, so this one is C is the correct answer to this one. We are looking at oxidative addition and a reductive elimination. And the way to kind of go about this question is that for people who have done a lot of chemistry, this will seem pretty simple and you'll probably be quite familiar with these concepts. For people who haven't done a heap of chemistry though, you can still come to this answer. So everyone, I'm assuming, has a basic understanding about what oxidation and reduction is. So oxidation, we're talking about the loss of electrons, which means whatever you're talking about is becoming more positive. Reduction is the opposite of that process, in which you're gaining electrons and becoming more negative. So when we look at our catalytic cycle, so we can actually see in the first step, we go from a palladium 0 to a palladium 2. And that means that we're becoming more positive. You can tell that's our oxidation process. And then in our final step, as we return to that starting catalyst, we're doing the opposite. So that must be a reduction. So that's how you kind of work out your actual chemistry part. And the rest of it, I think you don't actually need chemistry. Everyone knows what addition is and everyone knows what elimination is. You don't need to actually know what these processes are occurring, but if you look in that first step and we're looking at our catalyst center, you can see that molecules are being added to it. All of a sudden there's something new being bound to it. We're adding something else. So that's where we get our, in our last step, we're removing something. We're eliminating a molecule from the catalyst. So without knowing the actual chemistry behind what an oxidative addition is, just a little bit of chemistry knowledge as to what oxidation is in the first place, we can work out that C is our correct answer. So that's kind of my way of approaching that kind of question. And yeah, if you do know a lot of the chemistry behind it, you'll be able to probably pick it up a slightly quicker, but without knowing all the complexities of it, you can still apply the basic principles to get the right answer. Okay, and so now move on to question 2. This one's a bit more of a visual question. So we're having a look and looking at the electrophilic partner. So if we recall from our STEM, it tells us that we're looking at a reaction of electrophilic partner and a nucleophilic partner. So I'll give you probably only 30 seconds for this one as well. I want to keep moving through. Don't want to leave you guys waiting for too long, but we'll talk through it. All right. How are we going, guys? All okay?
This one has 67% have chosen C and no one chose B, and A and D have the same 17%.
Okay. All right. Bit of a spread. All right. I like this. I'll put you all out of your misery. C isn't the right answer, but we'll talk through why it isn't and kind of how we get to what the right answer actually is. So when we're looking here, we can see that we've got for both options A and for option C, we're looking at the same molecule, which is our reagent A. And then our second option here is reagent B. The last option here is our catalyst. So whilst it undergoes oxidation and reduction reaction, it doesn't actually change in our reaction. It's not in either an electrophile or a nucleophile. So that is not our option. It's not an actual reactant in this question. Oh, we've gone forwards. Okay. Anyway, so then we look at our other two options. So we're looking at either between reagent A or reagent B. So in order to kind of work this out, we kind of need to know what is M and what is X. So if we look at our catalytic cycle, which is back in the stem, don't have to worry about going back to there, Sarah. It's fine. Everyone will have those notes. M tells us it's a metal. And for this particular reaction, it's actually tin metal. And so metals, so basic knowledge on what a metal is, they tend to be quite positive and they are not very good at holding electron density close to them, which means the carbon bond to it at point Q here is going to be quite electronegative and have lots of electrons around it. And in our STEM, it's even given us a definition that something that's quite electron rich acts as a nucleophile. So it's not likely to be our electrophilic partner. So that then leaves us with the options between A and C. So we're looking at the same molecule here, but two different points on the molecule. So in order, again, we need to know what X actually is. And X here, it's telling us there's a bunch of different examples, but there was a few halides there, and there was a few other weird functional groups and protection groups and things that are bound to oxygen or other atoms which are known to be really electronegative. So that's kind of a little bit of prerequisite knowledge there, knowing that those molecules are really electronegative. And you'll, having done any chemistry, even at a basic high school level, you will have come across these atoms as being really good at holding electron density close to them. So we know there's going to be lots of electrode density near the X, and that's going to be our more nucleophilic region. And if all that electron density is being held near the X, it's not going to be very close to the carbon center, which is why our answer is actually option A. At point P here, the carbon center is going to have a lot less electron density because it's all being pulled away from. So that's kind of a little bit of a walkthrough one. I think this is a kind of question where many students think it's really easy to get the right answer. And I suppose if you go about it in a systematic way, it is. But a lot of the time, there is just that one little point. You can't just choose an answer and go, yep, that's right. You've got to have that logic, go through the different steps and go, okay, does this make sense? So yeah, I'm glad a lot of you got the answer wrong because it kind of puts in perspective, okay, you can't just go with your first gut thinking. You've got to have that logic behind it. So X is the really electronegative one. So if we're looking at a point really close to X, there's going to be lots of electrons. It's not going to be electrophilic. Whereas if we're looking at point P, which is that bit further away and it's had all its electron density sucked away from it, that's going to be your more electron poor and your more electrophilic region. Okay, next question. Okay, so now we're looking at, we've been given two new reagents and it's now expecting to recognize the pattern and see what is actually occurring in this reaction and what do we expect the product to be. Okay, how are we going with this one? You okay? Getting a bit stuck? Where are we?
All right, so we have similar to last one, 57% with C, no Bs, 29% with A, and 14% with D.
Cool. Okay, awesome. All right, so I was going to say straight there, C is the correct answer. Okay, we'll talk about how we got there. So first of all, I think the really important thing is to actually look at reagent B and reagent A and reagent B, and identify like your landmark. So where is your M? Where is your X? And so we can relate them to the generic molecules we saw in our example that we were given. So if we look at reagent A, our chloride item, that is our X, that is our heteroatom. That's actually an example there. And then reagent B, our tin metal, SN, that is our M. So we know we can identify that's the part of the molecules we're looking at, and they're the important parts, plus the rest are just the functional groups on the end. And so what's involved in this reaction? It's basically, to work the answer from this one, it's kind of just recognizing the pattern and what is actually occurring. And looking at our first example, it's just looking at the two regions where the double bonds are and just forming a single bond connecting those. That has no effect on the rest of the molecule. We're just looking at purely at that part. So we can look at C as the right option here, and that we have our two double bonds with that one single bond in there. And that dark bond just means it's to do with the stereochemistry. Don't worry about that. It's the same in all of them, so you don't need to worry any stereochemical considerations for this example. So we've got our two double bonds, and then the rest of the molecule is exactly the same. It's literally just tagged along. There is no changes to it whatsoever. And unless there is any information in the stem or some other in the question, there is no reason to change the rest of the molecule. And I think this is a really important part. And this is your pattern recognition skills, like Gabby was talking about the quotes, being able to recognize, okay, so there's all this fancy stuff going on. Cool, that's great. But without knowing any chemistry whatsoever, can I recognize exactly what is happening in this pattern and apply it with these new molecules? So that's all that question involves there. And with regard to the no cross-coupling product form, the only way I could kind of see that as being a possible answer is if there was some kind of information in the stem about the reaction conditions or something else that is required for it to occur. And for this stem, there actually isn't anything along those lines. We're just assuming that this all occurs. Whether this reaction actually occurs or not, you have no way of knowing. But unless they give you a reason to assume that it wouldn't, assume that it does. They've posed this question to you. There's a reason they want you to think it out. They're not trying to trick you out. Okay, so let's go into our fourth question. Oh, sorry, we've got a little bit more information first. So I'll give you 20 seconds to read through it. And they will often do this in science questions. They'll give you some information and then halfway through they'll go, oh, actually, by the way, or now we've changed our minds. This is now what you want to go by. So yeah, be prepared. Okay, so let's just talk through it. So for this question, we're talking about another cross-coupling reaction. That's just the overall name of what's occurring here. And it's given you the fancy name behind it, but really that doesn't matter. It's just a way of distinguishing this example from the first one. And what it's told you is that basically the same thing is occurring, however, the metallic partner, so the reagent that we were looking at before that had the M, had the tin in it, is now being replaced by borane. And if you have no idea what that is, they've given you this example here, and we can see there is a compound here that has a boron atom in the middle and an organic part on the end. That is your organoborane. My gosh, I cannot speak today. So it's pretty easy to work it out from there. You don't have to know that off the top of your head. They're not expecting you to know all these fancy chemistry things, but use a little bit of common sense and look at the words and you'll be able to work it out the majority of the time. So we're telling you that this is our being used in place of our metal partner. So there's no other metal here. We're now looking at boron instead. So a little bit different. And it has an extra step in the cycle, which occurs between steps 1 and step 2. So it's not replacing anything. It's an extra step in between there. And it's showing you an example of the overall reaction here. So we can see that if this were tin, for example, where the boron is, it's the exact same product. So the overall, we're coming at the same outcome. There's obviously just a slight little difference in the mechanics of it. Okay, so let's move and we'll actually have a look at the question for this one. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay. Have a read through these options. This is where it might get a bit tricky for some, but if you get lost, I would recommend you refer back to your STEM. How are we going? Is this one a little bit trickier than the last?
This one, the numbers are very exciting to me because we have C with 11% and then 22 for B and D and 44 for A. So going with double
Oh,
numbers.
excellent. Okay, good. I like this. And it's actually really good because it makes a really good discussion point so that we can actually see. You're not going to remember by getting these questions right. You're going to remember the explanations and the reasons you got them wrong, which I think is a really good way of like actually how to then put my kinds of strategies in place to kind of see how to get the right answer and remember it as well, more importantly, rather than just take it in now and ignore it next time you go to answer a science question. Okay, so we'll go through this one. And I think the best way to do this kind of question is basically process of elimination. Because you don't have any information, you don't have a mechanism about what is actually occurring in these transmetallation steps. They're not asking you to interpret something that's directly in front of you. They're kind of asking you to hypothesize, or not hypothesize probably isn't the right word, but to consider what is occurring between the reactions. What is occurring in the arrows? What are the actual steps involved? And because this is a new step when we're looking at it, this is a new step that's additional to the cycle we were given at the start. It's a little bit trickier again because we don't know for sure. So I kind of go about this in a mechanistic way. And so we're looking at option A. So we're looking at palladium 0 changes to palladium. Sorry, first of all, before I go through the answers, I skipped ahead a little bit there. We're looking about what is the transmetallation step. So it tells us in, I think it's the additional bit of information we get, that we have an additional one there. We already know what our reaction step 1 and step 3 of our reaction are from the very beginning, because we named those in our very first question. And our middle step there, step 2, that was our transmetallation, the one dealing with the compound with the metal in it. Now it's telling us there's 2 of those steps. So we're looking at those 2 middle things between step 1, so step 1 till, and then the second one as well. So we're looking at option A now. We'll go through our options and we'll kind of discuss why they're either correct or not correct. So looking at A, it's telling us in the first one that we're expecting palladium 0 to change to palladium 1 and then palladium 1 to palladium 2. And the way I like to think about this, the reason that this option is wrong, is that this occurs after the step 1 of the reaction. And the step 1 of the reaction, our palladium goes to a palladium 2 state. So we're already in that palladium 2 state before those transmetallation reactions occur. So we can already say, okay, well, that one's not going to be our answer. By going back to our STEM and looking at our cycle, we know that we're already beginning with palladium 2. So that can't be our answer. Looking at option B, it's telling us hydroxide is transferred from sodium to palladium in the first step. And then in the second step, the organic ligand, so the bit that's attached to boron, is then transferred from boron to palladium. Okay, there's not a lot of information to go, yeah, that's right, or you know that's wrong. That sounds like a transmetallation step. Our hydroxide group is going from our sodium metal to our palladium metal in the first step. In the stage, the organic part is going from boron, which we're told is acting like a metal in this reaction, to palladium, which is a metal. So that also sounds like transmetallation. So that sounds like it could be right, but we don't really know much else to be really confident with that answer. Looking at option C, it tells us that hydroxide is transferred from sodium to the organic ligand from A, And then the organic ligand from B is transferred to palladium. And if we look at going back to our cycle here, I think it's the best way to kind of visualize this, is that we're looking in between steps 1 and steps 2. And there is no addition of our hydroxide group onto our organic ligand there. So we can kind of go, okay, that's not a likely mechanism for that one. And it's also talking about the organic ligand from reagent A, and that's already attached to our palladium metal in our first step of the reaction. So I know this is a bit difficult to see, so that's why I really recommend having that cycle and keep referring back to that stem, referring back to that diagram. It's going to like consolidate the information a lot more and help you visualize what is actually occurring. So C is probably not the right answer there. And then we look at option D, organic ligand from reagent B is transferred from the boron to palladium, and then the hydroxide is transferred from sodium to boron. And the way I can kind of justify this one as not being the right answer is that we're kind of saying here, in that first step, the organic ligand is being transferred from boron to palladium. And that's what we want. If we look at our cycle at the end of step 2, that's what we want to happen. We want that organic region to bind to palladium. So what's the point of having this second step here? Again, if we're in the first step, we're already achieving what we want in this catalytic cycle. So that's kind of a way you can, like, through process of elimination, go, okay, so B probably is our right answer. We kind of worked out that, yeah, they both sounded like transmetallation steps to begin with, but by going through and going, okay, all these other options probably aren't right, we can be pretty confident that that is the right answer, and it is for this question. So that's a really tricky one. It's kind of then putting in perspective that little bit of additional information and using it to kind of visualize it. So there's not a lot of chemistry actually in there. That's just purely looking at the information given and applying it. We haven't talked about really much about the oxidation states or what all these things are, or actually the reaction conditions by which these transfers occur. We're literally just talking about entities being switched around. It doesn't have to be in a chemistry context. It just happens to be for this one. So that's a bit of a tricky one, so don't freak out. Most people would probably get a question like that wrong, but that's why I'm really in favor of the process of elimination response, because if I was asked to come up with that on top of my head, I would have absolutely no clue where to begin. But by going through it and going, okay, that doesn't seem likely, you can be much more confident in your answers. All right, so with that, we'll just move on to our last question. This one's a little bit friendlier, a lot friendlier actually. Have a read through and please submit your answers when you're done. All right, I think we might start going through this one now. There's not too much to it. How did we go, Sarah?
Yep, this one was pretty tight. So 10% for C, 20% for A, 30% for D, and 40% for B. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So again, with this one's like my first step with anything when they're talking about what is an advantage or a disadvantage or something. My first kind of process is to go through your options and go, okay, logically, first of all, does this make sense? Or is this some completely random thing that can't be physically possible? Or is that a reasonable reason that could occur from this reaction? Second of all, I like to think, does that sound like an advantage? Sometimes they will pose something that sounds like an advantage, but really sounds more of a disadvantage to a reaction. So if we go through these options, they all seem quite logical, quite possible, and they also all sound like they could be advantages. So that kind of makes it a bit tricky. There's none you can kind of cross out on that basis alone. But the way I would say is that to kind of assume these are all true unless you're given information to tell you otherwise. And I think where that kind of comes in is that referring back to that STEM, and it's really important to get out that important information the first time. Obviously, you don't have time to read that STEM 100 times through, which is really important, that first skimming process, and getting all kinds of things that could be useful. If there's an equation, if there's a variable, if there's something you haven't heard of before, that's also a really good one. And yeah, so from there, we can actually tell us in our STEM directly, it tells us that this type of reaction occurs in sp2, sp2, or sp2. It also tells us we're talking about unsaturated carbons. So there's a little bit of chemistry knowledge here, and that when we're talking about sp3 hybridized, we're talking about carbons that are completely saturated and have 4 bonds. And in all the examples we have been given, and as well as in the actual text, it's been telling us we're dealing with unsaturated carbons. So that's kind of how we can go, okay, D isn't going to be likely. That's not going to be an advantage that actually occurs. It'd be cool probably if it did occur, but that's not likely one that is occurring, because all the information we've been giving us is telling us we're dealing just with unsaturated carbons. Whereas all the others, we don't really have much information about them, but they all sound like they would be really advantageous. As D, we're being told we're dealing with unsaturated carbons, so that one's not going to be an advantage of this particular type of reaction. So that's kind of all we've got done for the questions. So first of all, so let's move on to the next slide. That's all right, Sarah. So first of all, I'd like to say awesome work, guys, because that question I feel is like on the harder side of what you will be asked in the science section. And that was quite a complex example. So I kind of just say good work for working your way through it all. And these are kind of like my 2 takeaway points. Obviously, I have my process of how I go about logically answering each of the questions, and you guys have all that up on the previous slide. But even if you just take 2 things away from this, and don't take one being the question was that was really hard, I didn't get any of them right, because most questions will not be that hard. This was supposed to be a very complex example to show you how I would go about approaching a question like this without relying heavily on prior chemistry knowledge. So the first thing is, do not panic when you see something you do not know or that you've never heard of before. You will learn things as you go through the section, so do not worry about that. That does not mean that you don't know enough or you haven't prepared enough. Just have your way about your strategy about going about those questions. That's all you need to do to prepare for those things. And the second thing is, once you've answered the question, so once you've actually read through the answer options and you've selected which one you think is the most likely, even if you haven't circled on a bit of paper yet, even if you're just thinking in your head, okay, I think A is the answer, ask yourself again, does that make sense? Does my reasoning make this seem like a logical answer? And that's kind of just a way of double checking it, that you haven't gone down some tangent that is totally irrelevant. It's a way of bringing it back and going, okay, yes, this is a likely answer. Awesome. Now I can move on. So that's kind of all I have for you guys. Yeah, I hope that wasn't too heavy or anything. I think the best way to create strategies for complex questions is to actually work through them. Yeah, so that's kind of all I had. Are we passing back to Eliza now? Is she here? I think so.
Liz, are you there? Okay, while we wait to see what Eliza's up to, I want you all, first, thank you so much, Gabby and Keely. And if you could all write in the chat one thing that you learned or gained from this session. It can be anything that any of us went over, something general, whatever you like. We'd just love to see, and it helps us know what kinds of things you like hearing about. Yeah, no, this is awesome. In a few minutes, we'll give you a chance to ask us any questions that you might have. I know that a couple of you sent me some already. We'll just hand it over to Eliza for a few minutes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's great to see Gabby's indoctrination worked. Perfect practice. What was it? Perfect practice something. I can't remember it.
Makes perfect.
Perfect practice makes perfect.
Sorry, I clearly didn't practice that one. But for a lot of the students on this masterclass now, it's amazing to see that you have already enrolled tutors, which is great. But very much just wanted to go through what's next for sort of a lot of the new students who haven't been with Halad yet. So we'll skip to the next slide. So very much what's next. So for a lot of you who haven't yet come through and seen our Facebook community, I definitely suggest that first of all you join our Facebook community, because that's where we're posting a lot of the free resources that our tutors are making literally on every day. I will give you the link to that if you're not yet part of it, and that is really why we're doing this masterclass today, is because we had some free time. We asked you guys what you would like, and this is how the masterclass came to be. So we very much do use that community to listen to everyone and sort of what you need help with, and we can create stuff like this so that more people can get that help. Also, would be terrific if you could like our Halad Facebook page, because that's when you get a ton of notifications about when we release things and free things and stuff like that. So it'll be really easy for you. Also, that Facebook page is where we release a ton of free things. Like if you have not yet subscribed to this calendar, I'm going to link it here, and that's got all of the deadlines for the med and dentistry applications for Australian universities. And we have a team that basically just mans that calendar and makes sure it's up to date for you guys, so that you guys don't miss any dates, because that has happened in the past. We don't want that to happen to you guys. Or you can even sit our free mock exam that we did last week, and a lot of people have been wanting to sit that on their own, so that's the link over there. But if you really did enjoy sort of the content from today and really enjoyed sort of interacting with our tutors and getting more from them, and you want more of that kind of stuff, you can definitely, you're more than welcome to enroll in our extension intensives, which have actually started last Saturday. So as Gabby, Keely and Sarah's classes have all started, and you can enroll in our 6-week intensives, and they're just 2 hours per week for 6 weeks, and we do them by the section. So you can basically choose what you felt like you were weakest at maybe, or just something you want to improve in, and you can really hone in on those skills and go really in depth week after week. Hop over to the next one. And if you want sort of more content, you can definitely enroll in our mock exams, which are full-on 3 full-day mock exams across 3 weekends. And so I'm just going to I've got the link here that I'm going to pop here. And if you could walk through with me, I'll just quickly show you how to enroll, because we always get questions about how to actually do this process. And then we can come back to questions for the tutors. So you can start off by looking at, if you head over to the next slide. Firstly, just choosing what you actually want to improve on. So there's 4 things you can pick, the section 1, 2, 3, or just the mock exams. From there, you can choose your tutor. We have a team of 5 fantastic tutors. 3 of them you've already got to learn from today, and you can see what times that they have. The next, what we've actually done is, because we've actually started this Saturday, we sold out all our classes, and unfortunately a lot of students missed out on the first weekend that we launched. So we've actually created a whole ton of new classes. If we head over to the next slide, you can see that the only class that you can enroll in for this week left is actually tomorrow's class with Sarah for section 1. That is the only class you can enroll still. But we've opened up a ton of new. Hop over to the next slide, and you can see the new schedule. So those are all the new times that we've put in. You can have any of the tutors on there, and I suggest you hop in quick because they are sure to book out as well. In terms of finding a mock exam time, the mock exam timetable is here. So it's either you sit on the Saturday or the Sunday, but we're also super easy. If you can't make a particular day, we can swap you over. But we very much invigilate the exam in real time. And if that's not possible for you because of your time zone, we can always work out a way for you to sit that exam and open it up for you. Next, so those are all the options in terms of enrolling into an intensive or a mock exam, but we very much do suggest that you get a friend on board, because when you enroll with a friend, you get 15% off everything, including the packages there. So that's you can sort of enroll in all of the sections and as well as the sections and mocks and get a further discount from there. To the next slide. So like I was saying at the very beginning, all of our proceeds from our GAMSAT tuition has originally through our cause, which has been to really teach and give proper health education over in disadvantaged communities. And so far we've had 120 GAMSAT students come through, which has been incredible. So we've been able to raise over $7,000 to teach over 4,000 students in rural Philippines. And you can see Gabby there, who has been one of our teachers over there, which is really cool. But very much now, unfortunately, because that's not possible, we will be rediverting all of those funds to a COVID-19 response, which is amazing just to see that we can really do our part in supporting the frontline health workers who are really overworked right now. If you head over to the next slide. We're also just super flexible. If any of those class times or anything needs to change, you can just email Carleen, who is our operations manager here, and she is super fast to respond and will answer any questions. And if you want that discount code with a friend, Carleen's the one to hit up. Over to the next slide. So for students who are, but then you do need to at least enroll a day before your class starts. We've had a lot of students enrolling last minute, which has been very lucky that Carleen is very fast to respond. To the next slide. For students who are in this session and they're new students, if you, and this is for the next day only, all of our tutors are really happy to give a private session for you before you start your classes if you use the promo code when you check out at the link below. Using the promo code Masterclass. I'll just type that in so that you guys don't get that incorrect. And that is for anyone who is going to check out anything in the next day to use. Feel free to use it and we'll get straight in contact with you for your private. And if we head to the last slide. So I'm going to pause here and make a radical suggestion that you now have, I guess, the opportunity, which is the best thing about being part of this sort of strategy masterclass and all of the online things that we do, is you have access to all these other students who are also wanting to get GAMSAT tuition. And so definitely in the chat, make the most out of it and hit up someone and say, hey, do you want to sign up together, because you can both get the discount. And we're really, the reason why we have the with a friend discount there is because we've just seen students come through, and if they're coming through with a friend, they are so much more motivated, and that's really the reason why we have it there. You don't really have to be friends, but I'm sure you will be after this whole process. So I'll leave it there. I'll let you guys chat each other away if that's something that you want to do. And then I'm going to hand over back to the tutors. Unless you have any questions about that, you can hit me up in the chat, but I'll pass over to them to answer your questions as well.
Awesome. So if you do have any questions, just type them in the chat for us. But we did have one already for Gabby from Danica before. Hopefully she's still here. I think she is. Which was about the taking time to plan and specifically the task you did tonight about how, like, breaking down the prompt so that you know what it's about, how long would you say you should take to do that?
Okay, I can't find the question, but is that during exam conditions? I would probably, because you're going to be spending 30 minutes per task, I would probably spend about 5 minutes at the start, really thinking about what the topic is. And if you really wanted to break it down further, that 5 minutes would probably be 2 minutes of interpreting what the topic is, and reading the prompts if you haven't already done that in reading time. And then that 3 minutes would be that proper planning, having your scrap paper there. I do a table method. If you're in my classes, you'd see the table method I do. I have to do that every time, otherwise I can't write an essay. So I'd spend that other bit of time planning it out from there. So I'd say about 5 minutes, but you have to really figure out what works for you. I'd say anything more than 5 minutes is probably eating into your writing time a little bit too much. But what you could always do is start planning. And if you feel like you haven't planned your whole essay in 5 minutes, just start writing and then come back to it later on. But it's all about practicing this text study and find out what works for you. I hope that answered the question.
Cool. So we have one in section 2. What are your thoughts on writing 2 essays versus writing 1 essay and 1 creative style piece?
Again, this is such an annoying response, I'm sorry, but it really depends on you and your strengths. So that's why it's so important to be really reflective in your studies so you can really figure out what your strengths are. For me, creative pieces were just not a strength of mine. I tried, I really tried, but it just wasn't my thing. It just didn't work. But that's okay. Something that Sarah and I touched on in our classes in week 1 is we said, don't make how you say something more important than what you say. So don't focus too much time on trying to make something really unique, like writing a song or something. If you've never done that before and you've never practiced doing that, just focus on writing a good, high quality essay if that's what you're most comfortable with. But in saying that, you have still a bit of time until GAMSAT. So if you wanted to explore writing creative pieces, then give it a crack and see how you go. It might be a strength, but make sure you are rereading it and self-marking and getting someone else to read it as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I would just like add to that like you can write it in literally whatever style you like. There's no restrictions, and we do a bit of myth busting in our classes of sometimes you hear things through the grapevine that you have to write it in certain styles or whatnot. Write whatever style you like. Just make sure that you're saying what you want to say and want to express. That's so much more important than what style you are writing in. And if you write 2 plain essays really well for both sections, you won't have marks deducted or anything because it wasn't as exciting as a creative story could have been. And Mia, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Just first of all, thank you for this masterclass. But I just had a question regarding annotation. Just with regards to the new format being online and the 2 pieces of paper. More generally for section 1, I was wondering if you have any tips on how to annotate, if we should annotate or maybe write down keywords, because I think section 2 and 3 sort of discussed it a little bit, but I just had that question for section 1 specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a big believer and lover of active reading, and I honestly don't know in terms of the ProctorU platform and what ACES platform will provide, whether you'll get tools like highlighting or whatever. So if you do get that, you can consider that a bonus. But for now, let's assume that you won't get any of that. What I would suggest, I'll give you one tip now, and then what I would suggest is we ran a webinar 2 weeks ago, and I think I repeated the same thing last week in our mini mock webinar on how to actively annotate when it's on an online platform. So hop on our Facebook page and find the links to those and watch that part, and that should help you. But my one tip for now would be that same idea of what is this about. As you go along, track through and keep checking and making sure that you haven't zoned out. And so ask yourself as you're reading along, what is this about? Do I still know what this is about? And then each paragraph, ask yourself, what's the main thing that happened in this paragraph? If you need to write it down to stay engaged in like a kind of boring text, just write down like 1 or 2 keywords. But yeah, we go through quite a few worked examples in the webinars that we did over the past 2 weeks, so you can go and check those out as well. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, great question about getting so entrenched in section 1 and section 2 that it's enjoyable, and it's almost that opposite problem of zoning out. Tips on detaching while still reading actively. Yeah, that's a really good one, because I agree, I really enjoyed some of the section 1 stems. I think when that would happen, what I would do is I'd write like a little note on my paper to like look that thing up later. Like if it was something really good, like a really good book or something, and then straight after the section I'd go and investigate it. But for that time it was almost like this mental game of like, no, Sarah, like you need to focus on the task right now, and this is like really interesting, but that's not why you're doing this. So it's more of a mental game rather than like a how to detach but not zone out completely. I don't know if Keely and Gabby have thoughts about that too. You're welcome to add in.
I was going to say, definitely relate to that. That was 100% me throughout the majority of section 3. For me, I kind of like to use it as like a little bit of like a mental break while you're reading through it, because I'm enjoying it. It's not like a hassle. It's not a pain. I know particularly for me, like section 1 and section 2 were a pain. I had to like constantly be reminded of, all right, stay focused, work on this, look out for this, because they're not my kind of cups of tea. But section 3, I could enjoy it a little bit more because I found it so interesting. And so I use it as like reading it through as a bit of a mental break, but also at the same time, be conscious that you're not going into too many of those details that aren't relevant. So enjoy it, because it does make it easier. It is a long day and a long exam. So make sure you do, you know, have that mental endurance to keep going. And it is nice to have those little breaks and those nice interesting stems every now to break it up, but make sure you are still just looking out for those really important things as you go through. And as Sarah said, if you're finding it really interesting, go back and Google it straight after the exam.
Yep, did a lot of that. Okay, and another one for you, Keely. Any tips for fast and accurate maths, especially with an online format?
Right. Okay. So it's not something we've kind of discussed much yet, but it's something we've kind of planned for one of our classes coming up, is really doing the maths and trend-based questions. And I think particularly with maths, they're not going to ask anything too ridiculous of you, because obviously you do not have a calculator. But I would really recommend obviously knowing your basic trends, things like logs and exponentials, know like roughly what's occurring there. And your math doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of the time your answers will be distinct enough that a ballpark answer will enable you to, through process of elimination, go, okay, closest that's in the same magnitude that where, you know, the answer I calculated is. And so for that, I know I would probably really recommend using a bit of paper. Just write down the number of the question at the top and kind of just work it out. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of the time, a rounded number is more than sufficient. So I would use nice numbers. If you've got some kind of decimal, I would normally, in most cases, it's okay to round up to the closest number. And it makes it a lot easier for your maths. And yeah, if you want more information on that, we're definitely covering that. I think it's week 3 of the side of the section 3 content. We've definitely got a whole week covered to maths and trends and all those kinds of things.
So good. Awesome.
Ace, I'm just going to answer one. Someone said, I'm sitting the test in September. I'm from the UK. Will the mocks be available prior to the September sitting in UK time? Unfortunately, not quite. We stick to the Australian schedule, but I do suggest that we just don't know if we will have the mocks done in time for the September UK time. But I do suggest that you sit the current mocks that we have, because we create different ones for each sitting. And so it would be beneficial for you to sit the mocks, and you'll get all the explained answers and all that to keep for you to maybe resit during your September time, so you have those resources on hand.
Awesome. Cool. For section 2, what are your thoughts on writing with a comic undertone and using trivial related examples to support your ideas?
Yeah, so I actually used to have this student who would write in a very comedic way, and I loved it. I really enjoyed their writing. But I want to remind you to remember, sometimes it's not really appropriate to have a comic sort of undertone with some themes. So just really, or some topics rather. So just really remember that topic and have your topic as your number one in your mind. So if you think it's appropriate and you think you can do it well, then go ahead. But yeah, just be really mindful of the topic and trivial relatable examples. I think relatable examples are always a good thing to include. But again, just make sure it's on topic and it's relevant. It sits in with the tone. That's one really important thing, I think. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Pretty much the same. I would say with section 2, it's your one opportunity to show who you are. And so if that's who you are and that's how you express your ideas best is through humor. And like Gabby said, if it is appropriate to the topic, you're more than welcome, a comedic undertone. In terms of trivially related examples, so fine as well, as long as your example is fitting. And I would say just across the board, any examples you use, try and make them specific rather than vague. And so don't just write about, it's hard, this one time I experienced loss, and then you make a joke about it. Make sure you put in enough detail if you're using an example. But definitely if that's how you communicate and it's leveled and appropriate, it's so fine to use a comedic approach.
I'll just pop in on that one as well. I know I'm a section 2 person, but using like trivial examples, I think that can be, as long as it's something you're like knowledgeable, something you have enough understanding of to explain. I think it's a really like useful thing. I know personally, I am obsessed with musicals, so most of my essays had some kind of musical reference. There's lots of historical musicals. Nearly every essay I wrote in practicing had some kind of musical reference in there because it was something that I was really familiar with, more probably than the topic itself, which meant that I was able to, I know nearly every musical there was. So if I found a topic, I was able to find something that was really specific but related to the topic. And I had enough knowledge that I was able to explain it. And that for me made it more enjoyable as well. So as long as it's something that you can relate to the topic, I think there's
And that's what we sort of try to focus our classes on as well. Sarah and I both had the same approach, section 2, and it was to very much use your own passions and your knowledge to create a theme to then tackle any topic that you get given. So we definitely, that's like our focus. So hopefully if you are in our classes, we will be able to help you sort of get your interests and your passions to use it in every essay.
Yeah.
Have you ever written about milking almonds, Gabby?
No, I didn't, but one of my students suggested that I should write about hummus manufacturing.
Ooh.
And maybe next time, yeah.
Next time.
Stay tuned.
We might.
Well, in saying next time, actually, did you see Rachel's question?
Yes. So I really like this question. Did any of you guys sit multiple times? Any advice for mental edge on yourself to conquer the reset and overcoming past failure? The goal is that this is my last one. I might give it to Gabby and Keely in a second. I actually only sat it once, but what I will say is that the confidence battle of getting where you want to be, especially like getting into medical school, getting into dentistry. I personally can't speak for dentistry, but I just remember the confidence battle that it was, and the many times I felt shattered and felt like I just was never going to make it, and that I wasn't enough and I wasn't smart enough, and it was really hard. And I think like now that I'm here and I'm 3 years in, it's a very different lens, and looking back, that was a very small part but important part of this journey for me. And it makes it sound really cheesy, but I think like if you're feeling discouraged, I promise it's worth it. I promise that this test can feel really menial sometimes, but now like every day I get to live my dream. I get to do medicine. I love what I do. So when you're feeling really discouraged, I do promise it's possible. I was never the smartest one. I was never the one that was like super expected. I had so many people tell me I couldn't get there, and teachers at high school tell me to pick a different dream. So definitely just like this little like boost if you need a confidence boost. I think like everyone can get there. It's just about like problem solving and techniques, and I guess like showing that like you deserve to be there and not giving them a reason to not pick you. So even though I didn't sit it more than once, I definitely relate to that confidence battle and that needing to pick yourself back up. But yeah, I'll let Keely and Gabby, I think that you guys sat it more than once, so yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I kind of sat it twice as well, in my second last year, my last year of my undergrad degree. And the way I kind of came out with it the first time, I did like no preparation whatsoever. Like the very last possible minute is when I signed up for it. It was very last minute. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised. So it wasn't so much like a failure. I didn't know what to expect. And I also had no idea how the scoring system worked. Even now, I'm still kind of only just understanding it now, kind of having two to compare. I can kind of see the difference. But I kind of just went into the second attempt going, all right, I'm actually going to do a bit of preparation this time. And my kind of goal was just to improve a little bit in each of the sections because I thought that was a realistic outcome for me. And I ended up being really happy with my second time round. But similar to what Sarah's saying, I've always been that person where I had no faith, even after getting really good GAMSAT results coming back and going into applications, I still had no faith I was going to get into medical school anywhere. And I applied to literally everywhere with hope that I'd get into at least one. So again, like having the no confidence in myself was a big one. And I know that can be kind of problematic, but for me, I think it's always been what drives me to work hard and that I never expected to do well. It was kind of just a bonus that I did that, you know, bonus I did that little bit better on the GAMSAT than I thought, and that I got into medical school and things like that. So it was really a driving factor for me. All right, realistically, I want to improve a little bit in each section, and I kind of, you know, worked really hard and doing preparation, doing really smart study tips to kind of in the lead up to it, and then to get like a little bit more of a bonus increase in each of the sections than what I anticipated was, you know, kind of a, you know, was like a reward for all the hard work I put in the lead up to it. So kind of using that.
Yeah, I was the same. I sat it twice as well. We probably sat the same ones.
Probably.
Yeah. The first time I did study for it, but I just like had no idea what to study, and I was very confused about what the GAMSAT even was. Like I was very confused. And I came out and I got my score, and it was horrific. I was shattered, and I thought I'd never get in, and I sort of gave up pretty much, and I just started researching other things that I thought, okay, they'll still give me the same satisfaction, and they'll still, you know, these other backup plans, maybe I'll be better at those. Maybe I wasn't ever suited for medicine. And then I'm not sure what really changed at the end of second year. I just decided I'll give it one more crack and see how I go. And I sat it again in third year, and I really put my all into it. I surrounded myself with people that were able to support me and to really encourage me to keep going. And I highly recommend that. I think that's the most important thing. Surround yourself with people who will encourage you to go. They don't have to be med-related people. They don't have to be in your course. Actually, the best supports for me were those who weren't trying to get into med. Your family, your friends, just surround yourself with them. My mum actually came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks and sat like mocking. So yourself with little cheerleaders like that, and that imposter syndrome stuff, it never goes away. I'm pretty sure we'll always experience it every day of our lives, but it's slowly you slowly get used to it, I think. But hopefully that helped you.
Thanks, guys. We might just finish on this question from Yong. Keely, how would you deal with time-consuming questions, but you feel like you should know the answer? Any tips on moving on?
Look, I'm not sure if this is like a really good tip or anything, but this is just like what I did. If I found a question that I really was not enjoying, I was not vibing with it, or really was going to have to put a lot of mental effort into understanding, I would just skip it and come back to it. Do all the questions that I could do quickly, or the ones that would build my confidence in my strategy, get that really into an order first, and then come back to it. Because again, I think you guys have a bit more time per question this time, but I know when I started, it was like a big push for time to get the questions done. Like you would finish and have 30 seconds left over at the end. So I would always go through those questions and go, all right, if this is going to take me too long, I'll move on and come back to it. Once I'm in more of a state, I've practiced, I've rehearsed, I've done a bunch of science, I'm kind of in that mindset and ready to go. And then come back and have another look at it. Often it's less intimidating the second time around as well. And if you feel like you should know the answer to it, I would probably say you don't most of the time. There may be a little detail that you might be missing, but go back and look at your STEM for that important information. If you do, like I know I said, ideally you just want to read the STEM once, but if you're really stuck, I would say read it again. The majority of the time, if it doesn't tell you the answer, it gives you a hint. It gives you a hint in there that will help you narrow it down and at least get onto the right track. It's very rare for them to give you a question that requires a fair bit of prereq knowledge and feel like you should know it but have no idea where to begin. They always give you that starting point, or they give you some kind of indicator of how to go about it. I'm sorry, it's probably a bit of a vague answer. It's a bit difficult. It depends on what kind of question it is for me. For me, there was always those physics questions that was like, oh my God. Whew. But yeah.
I think just like
Awesome.
with that, don't be too hard on yourself. Like sometimes I'd be like, but I should know this. Like I've done this. I've seen this before. The GAMSAT is like no other test and exam I've ever sat, and I understand it way better now than I did when I sat it back in 2015, 2016. I don't even remember. I now know so much more about it and understand it way better. And when I was sitting it and I had questions where I was like, I should know this, but I don't. I was being too hard on myself. So be kind to yourself and just give it your best go. And if you see a question, I think that word should can be really toxic. And if you're like, I should know this and I don't, or I don't feel like I do, give it a moment, take a step back, try a different one, and then come back to it and just tell yourself like, I'm doing my best here. And that's like a much better attitude and a much more proactive and productive attitude than beating yourself up because you feel like you should know it and you don't. And yeah, that's even like a task to master as part of medical school. It's like all the time I feel like I'm getting asked questions that I should know the answer to, and I just stand there feeling really dumb. It's just part of it. Yeah.
It's like a marathon. One question isn't going to be the be all or end all. You got to make sure that you're doing the best for your performance throughout the whole thing. So don't get worked up on one question.
Yeah.
Generally, one question doesn't mean much, so don't stress.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, guys. If you do have more questions, these emails up here, you are so welcome to email any of us anytime. So you can ask us your questions. Yeah. But I'll just hand back over to Eliza.
Cool. As per usual, we are 45 minutes over time.
No surprises there.
One thing that we cannot do is time manage. Yeah, no, super cool. I love how Keely says, if I'm just not vibing with the question, I'm like, okay.
That's literally my term for physics. The minute physics comes up, I'm out.
Not vibing. Cool, amazing. Well, you can definitely catch any of these guys whenever you want. We're all on the Facebook community in the group. So if you genuinely need anything, reach out and we will help you out. Anyway, thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you guys soon, whether on Facebook, in a class or in a mock exam. Truly thank you so much for your time, and we hope that you got something out of it, and if anything, some confidence that we are here rooting for you always. See you guys soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.